What's going on, Micah?
Hey John, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for taking the time this afternoon. I know we've been talking about doing this for a little while and we're just getting around to it, but we were very interested in having a conversation just about kind of all things website, what we're seeing, what we're hearing. I think a big reason why I wanted to talk about this is obviously, the space that I live in every day, talking to a lot of folks about how to help them with the website they're working in already or potentially a new one. And there's a lot of interesting things across all of those conversations, so it should be a fun one.
Yeah. I mean, like now today in to hop on everyone's favorite buzzword, the age of AI, right? Like
Yeah,
a good website is more important than ever for like a variety of reasons. But also, it's not an industry specific thing, right? Like I think sometimes people think about like, oh well, I'm not in e-commerce, or I'm not a like SaaS platform, right? So like my website is not as important versus like if you are in the home services space or even B2B manufacturing or whatever. Like there is always a reason to have a good website, and I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of that today. But it's a good conversation to have for sure.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good place to start. And we can get into the AI, but I think we have to preface it because most people understand the importance of content for the website and fresh, regularly updated content. But yes, to your point, if you want to benefit from AI at all, it all starts with the content. Um, a lot of organizations out there have invested in that. A number of our clients understand that importance of that regularly updated content. But really, if in 2025, if you are not publishing content on a semi-regular basis, right there, you're probably already missing out on the ability for these generative AI bots or crawlers that are out there from picking up the content on your website, suggesting it to people searching in those instances, not only just the engines alone, too.
100%, yeah. Like, gone are the days when you could write a blog post and let it sit and collect, like not touch it for years or months on end. I think Neil Patel at Inbound, shout out to HubSpot and Neil, he had a great keynote that touched on this, which is there's a ton of research that shows, right, like the AI models are crawling sites and taking that information and feeding it back into the different answers that they're giving, but it's looking at the stuff that is one updated, but two in that specific area of ask or whatever the prompt is. So right, like I think the content piece of it is really important for staying updated, whether that's coming back every year or 6 months and like updating different stats or whatnot. But also just like keeping your site updated in general, right? Like if it sees a site from 2008 that hasn't been touched, it's not going to look at that and say that that's a reputable source.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think between the search engines and probably even AI now, the way that those algorithms or however AI actually works, it's beyond me. But how they're looking at those things, it's almost too easy for it to rule out aged or old content. We're even seeing it right now with the search engines looking at content in general, making sure that your brand's content is very, very specific to what you do. And I've even heard that the value of just longer form content has gone up. And to your point, Neil Patel's discussion, it brought up a very great opportunity. These brands that are working hard to publish this long form, really technical content, that's great. And AI might pick that up. Thinking back to how people still buy things, you're gonna go to AI for an answer or a question, and it's going to suggest something. But then you have that third component, the human component of, hey, I need a human to reaffirm what I've heard here before making that decision. Obviously, it's a reason why we're looking at generating more content like this to have that third party come in and say like, yeah, what you probably read is somewhat accurate. Here's how we can help you. Yeah, I mean, there's so many needs across the board. I think right now more than ever, people need direction on what's important and how do I get there.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is tough because there's a lot of changes. There's new entrants to the market space, and helping navigate that is one key component. But I think bringing it back to the website, content is going to be just really, really more important than ever, just because you're seeing with these search engines,
Yeah.
tons of companies like HubSpot that are seeing drop offs in organic search and visibility. So the content that you do have has to be really impactful. Granted, they're on a bigger scale than us. But yeah, back to just the website in general. The content's important, but just the need in 2025 and on to just have a updated and professional looking website for any of those businesses in the industries you mentioned, especially any B2B services. It's almost inexcusable to have an outdated website at this point, especially with in the past 10 years, the advances of technology across all of the different website platforms that are out there. We always mention the Wix, the Squarespace, the drag and drop editors, our platform Studio B, which is a little bit of a hybrid model of those. Then you have your WordPresses, your HubSpots, your Drupals, whatever the other CMSs you're looking for. There's tons of options. There's tons of different price points. The fact is that if you have an aging or outdated website right now, there's really no reason you should.
Yeah, you're getting hurt on multiple fronts, right? You're missing out on potential business. The AI stuff we already kind of touched on, right? But like you're missing out there. And then also just like in general, I think now you have more options than ever to get into an affordable one, right? Like you can have, right, a crazy developed custom site that, it costs you 6+ figures and takes a couple years to build as an ongoing project to get to everything. But at the same time, you also have, sites where it's like, if you're in, the manufacturing space, right, and it's just more or less like what we would call a brochure site where, you're talking about, hey, these are the different services that we offer. Here's some of our work, some of our case studies. Might have a blog going on, right, but that's a whole other thing for content, right? But like the core of your site is, between 5 and 10 pages. There's no reason that you have to pay $50,000 to get a quality site, right? There's so many options, even like working with an agency like us to get in there for, a few grand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of folks fall into that trap. And Chris always says it, our owner, good is better than great. Mm-hmm. Get something that looks good up and you can always add to it. You can always improve upon it. But no, you're absolutely right, especially with all of those lower cost drag and drop editors, right? You can go ahead and try and build it yourself. I always caution against that, especially if you don't have a design background. I've tried it. We did a whole little video on it, which we'll hopefully be releasing at some point. It tends to look like a designer didn't design it, which is not what you want. So I always caution there. But those tools are out there for the people that are comfortable in them. If you're working with, a one-person shop or a solopreneur, great option. We kind of took that drag and drop editor and layered in a professional designer's tender love and care on top of that. So it's just like a slight step up, and like to your point, price point wise, it's a few $1,000s or less more, and you get the benefit of having a well-designed professional looking website from a pro that does it.
Yeah, Studio V is a great option for that, right? And there are broader capabilities too, that something like that where, it's not one of these broadly utilized drag and drop editors like a Wix or a Squarespace. No shade on them, great product, right? But it doesn't solve for everything, right? And like there are certain cases where like, e-com, for example, or, like a real estate, brokerage, right? Like that doesn't quite fit because there are broader technical pieces that need to go into a site and match into the design that something like, a Wix or a Squarespace just can't do, right? But you also don't want to spend, $40,000-$50,000 on designing one of these sites because realistically, like you don't need that much out of it in order to, do what you need to do.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I think there's a case in point for each particular instance. What I always kind of coach folks, if they're diving into, say, an e-commerce instance. Now, if you have a proven business model where you're generating a substantial amount of income from your business now, we could definitely look at building out a more complex and more, frankly, expensive e-commerce version with all the customizable features, connections. You're in the space, you understand how many people want to integrate ERPs and all that good stuff. So that's there. But I always kind of coach folks that if you're dipping your toes there, think about what your maybe top 5, top 10 products might be. And you can kind of start small with one of those drag and drop platforms for e-commerce and really build a proof of concept of your business. Get some revenue coming in, get some people transacting with you. Now, the user experience and the customization of that might not be at the level that you want or, at the Amazon level, the checkout experience, but that's okay. Start there, build that momentum, get some revenue. And then the nice part about those drag and drop platforms, you can always level them up and take that design if you like it and build it into, say, a WordPress WooCommerce instance or HubSpot instance. Obviously, you probably wouldn't do that for the e-commerce side as it stands now. But it's a great way to start, and that's a journey you can go on. And the nice part about it is we'd always talk about budget and timeline. I know that was one of the things we wanted to touch upon today. The time to value with those drag and drop websites is just so much faster. it completely removes the developer from the process. And we love our developers, but it's just extra time and it's extra budget. So if you can start at that with the idea that once your proof of concept's off the ground and running, then we can look at, hey, how do we build this into an actual custom theme WordPress instance with WooCommerce and get you the bells and whistles. It's a really great approach. But as far as timeline goes, you could be looking at a custom WordPress project at 6 to 9 months or more, depending upon the size, where those drag and drop sites, our agency, as long as we have everything from the client, we can launch them as quick as 6 to 8 weeks. So it's really, an awesome opportunity for folks to leverage something that isn't, shoes that are too big to fit them.
Yeah. And I think Studio V checks a lot of boxes there and works really well for, companies of a variety of different industries and sizes too. But I think there's definitely a world where you need some of those more complex build outs, right? Depending on what your branding is, or your product offering, or any specific functionality, right? Or depending on what you want for analytics, right? Because some of the stuff that you can do inside of a drag and drop editor, even if it is as robust and built out as Studio V, you're not getting the same amount of info as you are on a custom site, and that really matters for some businesses. We've talked a lot about e-com, right? Like a custom built site for e-com, being able to get all of the analytics and like time on certain pages and stuff. Not all of the platforms have that, and so that's really important to get a handle on as your business goes up, right? Because that's ultimately, if you can improve some of those things or identify problems, that's where you can improve your profit margin as an e-com business. Looking, like I talked about analytics and stuff, there are a variety of other reasons that, even if you're not in e-com, you might want that information. If you think about some companies that are in the engineering automation space, right? Like, they could probably get away with a drag and drop site, right? A brochure site, even a robust one. But because their product is so complicated, they really need that ability to customize a site, 100% and get those analytics and stuff, because every lead that comes in the door there matters, because they're all big contracts, and, it's not like an e-com where, you're going to get a few thousand or even millions of orders depending on your brand, right? Like some of these businesses are generally like, hey, we do a few hundred projects a year and they're all really sizable and we do really well as a company, but we need to know exactly what's going on so that we can really hone our marketing efforts, and that's where some of those custom sites come in.
Oh, that's spoken like a true go-to market guy. But yes, you're right. I mean, when it comes to anything that's a considered purchase, typically higher dollar value, that people are going to research more in depth before they make a buying decision or a purchase decision. You're absolutely right. I mean, just the capabilities of what you can do with content. Obviously, why we love HubSpot CMS. A/B testing. Do we think this message is right? Do we think this message is right? Let's find out. You're right. I mean, it's lots of dollars at stake to those types of organizations, and yeah, that's definitely where we're going to look if someone has those types of needs. But, everyone has to start somewhere too, which again, that's still why HubSpot's a great fit. You don't have to get into all that yet. Start with that base of, hey, let's get a better website up, and then work with a good partner that's going to coach you along and say, okay, now that we've taken care of the core elements, what can we look at next? What can we potentially explore as, a way to refine our strategy and, influence the bottom line of the company?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point to touch on too, is, everyone's question to me all the time is, what's it going to cost? They want to know real quick. And I think that's where you have to be very careful about how quickly you try to tell someone, here's what I think the project's going to be from a financial standpoint. There's a lot more exploration, investigation, and overall just digging about the goals, where you're going, how you want things to be before you can get to that final number. So it's a little bit more of a challenging process when, that's the first question that you get, but it's really the last thing out of a multitude of steps that has to happen before you arrive there. And to your point, not everyone has that Nike-sized budget. I always joke with folks, like, I understand you're not Nike. What can we get to fit your business based off of your budget? And, I think that's another topic for another day, but I would love to just talk about just budgets in general. And, should you share that with an agency that you're potentially about to work with? My thoughts on that topic are that, it always helps me. I'm going to get you as close as I can to that, or if I can save you money, I'm going to show you how. But if I don't know that, it makes my job way more challenging, and sometimes you just miss steps.
Yeah. Well, I also think, right, that is somewhat the Midwesterners in us, right? Like we're always attempting to, help people as much as possible. There's tons of good partners and agencies out there, but you do end up with some freelancers and other agencies who are like, I'm going to get the most out of them for the least, which is unfortunate, right? Because there's nothing more exciting than helping businesses grow. And a website is a great way that you can help do that. But yeah, like for those custom ones, you'll always end up with a better product if you can, as someone that's shopping around, really be honest about your budget, and also just vetting your partner, right, to like make sure that what they are suggesting is always going to be right for you and not necessarily always max out your budget. There's not always a reason to be spending 20K just because someone says 20K, right? Like you can still do a lot depending on the partner that you work with inside of a budget like that for custom pages or sites, or even a brand refresh.
Yep. No, I mean, I think that's a great point, and I think that's why our agency is as close as we are across operations, the whole way from sales and support, is that we understand. And again, to your Midwestern comment, I did catch myself saying "ope" today. It's very true. The way we kind of approach it is that we understand that dollars matter to every organization, right?
Yeah.
I think a previous boss of mine had said, marketing's not an expense, it's an investment, and it has to pay off. So looking at it from that way of like, how do we get you the best we can within the budget that works for you? And being honest. I mean, I hate to say it, but just being honest with folks and telling them like, hey, I think this is what you need to start. And then once you get that going, you can always come back to us. We're not going away. Most of our clients are that way. They understand, let's get the bases covered, and then down the road, okay, I want to add the fancy features. Let's go. Okay, we'll have that conversation when the time gets there. It really depends on the organization, the speed at which you need to work. I think timeline was one of the big things we wanted to talk about. It's a question that I get asked a lot that I'd love to address. And, most people are always like, John, can you do this WordPress project in a month? And I can hear the rest of the team already yelling at me, but
the answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is usually no. If you want great work, if you want a really, really nice looking website and one that performs well, making sure you allot the appropriate amount of time for that project is so important. Even when you're rushing into 2-3 months, it's just not enough time. I mean, you have a lot of things in the background that I don't think most people buying these services maybe think about. Seasoned marketers probably gone through this process a few times to understand, but this is more on the business owner side that maybe doesn't work with an agency every day. The first step you're going to see in one of these bigger projects is you're going to have some strategy and onboarding. You're going to have the agency that wants to dig into your business, understand how you do business and go to market. We want to understand what's on your organization's roadmap. That way we can steer the project around or include things if need be. And that takes some time up front. And then you have a plan there that, the content strategist or writer, they want to know about your brand, who you are, how you want to communicate to your potential audience. Who is the audience? Is there, 1 or 2 personas? Is there 8? That's pretty important. And you get all that upfront work, and then the next step, then you have some account managers who are going to jump in and say, like, how are we going to build this project in a way that makes the most sense? And then you got creative. Let's talk creative. What is your brand going to look like? I know it came up in some of our marketing conversations about how most people, when they say I need a new website, are subtly sometimes saying I need a refresh brand. I've learned to kind of listen for that over the years, and kind of you have to ask some extra questions there because I think people think the meter or the cost is going to go up if they ask for that. When in reality, no, it's fine. We're already redoing the website. So if you want to take a step back and look at the brand a little bit and do that, it usually isn't going to be that much more.
Yeah.
And then you have development. That's one of those last chunks where it takes a developer a substantial amount of time to sit down and build that site that's going to be fairly large end to end. And then the last step that we always like to ensure happens is that Q&A process of making sure everything's working and where it should be, as it should be, before you go ahead and launch it. Sometimes that's one thing we've caught from other projects that have maybe made our way to us, that sometimes that step's overlooked, and it's important.
Yeah, 100%. I think My rule of thumb whenever I talk to clients, in our book of business, right, and when we're doing stuff like executive reviews, is, if you're going to think about doing a website, plan on doing it 6 months later than you anticipated. And when I say that, right, if we're talking about it in January, pull the trigger at a point where you'll be okay with it taking, 6 to 9 months to wrap up. And so, if you are thinking about that as, a marketer or business owner or whatever, right, like it takes a lot of thinking about the future and like looking at your business roadmap or your departmental roadmap and saying, I see this coming from like 6 to 9 months away. And I know that because of this, if this doesn't get done, I'm not going to be able to do these 4 or 5 other initiatives that I need to do, because it is such a linchpin for a lot of basically all digital marketing. At this point, having a good site, and there are times where like we have to turn away work because people are like, hey, we've talked to a bunch of other agencies. They say it's going to take 6 to 9 months. And same with freelancers and stuff. And can you guys do it faster? And we look at the project and we say, no, like these are the correct timelines that these other people are giving you. Like it's just not physically possible to give you something that will do your brand, your business a service and actually, perform in the way it needs to. Right? There are times where it's like, hey, we can bring on, an extra developer or whatever at extra cost, like it'll be higher and we can turn it around faster. Right, but then like to our conversation about budget earlier, that goes out the window, and you're stepping in it basically when it comes to your budget and timeline and stuff and potential quality, because we're up against a wall basically on both on the client side and on the delivery side, which is never a great experience for anyone and will put you often in a worse place than when you started.
Yeah, what you normally see happen at that point then is clients mad, agencies mad, and you don't get a good product at the end. Yeah, I know we've definitely lost our share of deals over the years of people saying, yeah, I could do that project in 1 to 2 months, and we know that's not going to happen.
And then in 3 months we say, yeah, this is going to take us 4 months to fix.
Yeah, they call us back and say, this is a train wreck. We didn't get what we thought we were buying. Can you fix it? And I love when that happens, but I don't love it for the client that went down that path, and they're usually very happy with us when they're like, okay, we followed your process and it actually panned out.
Right. It took 6 months anyways.
Yeah, and it's a challenge there. So, that honesty about that, it's one thing that, I don't love always telling people, but I feel the need that I have to tell people that because, again, with any professional service that you're buying, if you're not setting a great expectation and you're not aligned from the beginning, it's a recipe for disaster on both ends. If you're aiming for what we're aiming for, right? Happy clients and we're happy and working together and not at each other's throats because John said they'll get it to us in a week. If you're not doing that, it's a pitfall that comes up often. What else do we have on our list that we kind of wanted to talk to today?
I think that covers most of it, unless you want to dive into industry specifics, but we could spend an hour on each of those, right? Like what does the site look like for someone in the home services space versus, manufacturing, and what you can expect for some of that, right?
Yeah.
Price tag wise.
Yeah, I was going to say that's perfect segue too, because I wanted to touch a little bit on the value of having that updated website. I know we talked about why you should have an updated website, but overall value, it's always not just dollars and cents. This agency or this person could get me a site cheaper. The real overall value and why we're always saying you should have an updated website in 2025 is not because we sell websites. Yes, it is, but the real reason I always say that is that, in today's world, the first time someone meets you at a happy hour or sees a sign driving past your office, the first thing they're interested is going to your website. Yeah. So anytime that I'm prospecting and I spot one that I'm like, that doesn't look like it's been touched in a long time, and I'm like, why? Come on.
Yeah.
It's important. And then on top of that, we always hear I don't get leads from my website. And usually after after a little investigation is because they don't invest in it.
Yeah.
Your website's really your best salesperson. It's selling at 10 p.m. when someone's sitting on their couch and gets their butt about, I want to look at this potential service. It's there. And if you have that quality content, it's going to answer the questions that they're looking for. And it's going to position you as the potential option. And then hopefully, actually, we know statistically that when that happens and someone then fills out the form on your website to talk with you, the likelihood of closing that deal goes way up. I think it's like 78%. HubSpot said in a study, and that's like 5 years old. So like investing in those inbound opportunities only benefits your business and maximizes the potential return from that investment. We know that those deals close on a higher likelihood, and it's usually a better, smoother transaction because of the alignment. You know, they've educated themselves. They understand what they're buying. It makes sense to them. They're getting it reaffirmed by the salesperson, like Neil said. Same with AI, and you know, it just makes that process a lot smoother. So,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. What?
Nothing to add to that.
What industry do you think we should talk about? Or
I think home services really is like a good one, right? Like we talked a lot about Studio V and like getting into, you know, a website for cheap, right? And like home services is a place where like they have about 1 million other things going on, but they require new business coming in, right? And so like one of the last things they want to do is figure out, hey, I have to register a domain, and then I have to build a freaking site, and then I gotta make it look good, right? Like they're busy making other stuff look good, or like taking care of other horrid problems that are happening, like pest control and other stuff, and like they're making everyone else's lives better, right? And they don't have time to focus on their own site, or even build a site, period, right? Like, you know, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I have a contractor who, you know, I have to do a project, or, you know, I see do a project and I'm like, hey, can I give you a review? And they're like, yeah, we don't have a site to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you know, if you ever do, let me know. I will happily provide you a reference, or like feel free to give people my number and they can call me. Right. But like specifically in home services, having a site where you can look at reviews, you know, specifically in today's day and age, is so important.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of people that just have a Facebook page.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine, but
it's doing you a disservice.
It is, because like, to your point, you know, if you want to put a new kitchen in your house, or you need to fix your central air, and you find a company, or they were recommended to you, and you look for them and they don't have a website, your spidey sense starts going off of like, is this real? Are they on the up and up? Am I going to get a bait and switch here? Like, you start to have those questions creep in. Whereas when you have like that put together digital presence for a home service company, the trust factor automatically goes way up. Now the next thing is, what's the process? What's the price? Things you're good at. You know, hopefully you're competitive there and you're looking at that. It's kind of funny that it always goes back to those conversations. Like, if you're established enough that you're making a living even by yourself, or, you know, you have a few employees, focus on doing what you do well. HVAC, right? Do the HVAC work. Let someone else help you do the website work, because you're going to pull your hair out trying to do it yourself. Almost always probably won't get as good of a final product. And to your point, you know, it's a matter of, you know, maybe a few $1,000s to a business that, you know, will help them long term. So the value that you're getting for that money is tremendous compared to, you know, trying to do it yourself or just not having it.
Right, yeah, and it's not like you need this huge 30-page, 40-page site, right? Like, you know, you need 5 to 10, maybe 15, depending on, you know, if you're getting a lot into like the specifics of the products you offer, or, you know, specifics into custom work and all that type of stuff, and big portfolio, right? But like that alone, you're looking at like max is 10 grand, average is probably 5. And like at that point, you know, it's not a question of can you afford to get a website, it's can you afford not to. Which, you know, if you're thinking about building up your business, right, and like, again, I mentioned reviews, which are just a huge part of that industry.
Local SEO.
I spend a lot of time talking about that, but you need a website to tie that back to, right? Like, you'll find it on Facebook, but like most people go right to Google, and you can't have a Google business profile that appears on the right-hand side of, you know, Google's search engine page without having a site. And unfortunately, that's just a reality. And, you know, if you don't have that, chances are you're losing out on a lot of business.
Well, and I think on top of that, this is another thing that I see all the time, and it hurts me inside, is that you see a lot of folks in the home service space, because of that need for constant leads and opportunities, right? It's a natural place for advertising opportunities digitally.
Yeah.
You know, we do that. We have done it very well for a number of clients, and it can be very successful and lucrative for someone to have a very good digital advertising budget in that space. But a lot of folks forget that in order to be successful with that digital advertising effort, you have to have a nice website. You have to have, quality looking landing pages that correspond to those offers that you're putting out there in ads. And, it sounds like the digital marketer saying, well, here's more stuff that you need to buy. It's not that. It's just we know statistically that, if you do it one way versus the other, one is way more beneficial to your business. It's more effective. The statistics don't lie.
Yeah, 100%.
And then on top of it, I think to your point, like local SEO, that's such an important factor. Just being able to come up in a search when someone searched this service near me, it's worth a lot of money to your business. So
yeah,
if you're overlooking that alone, it's one strike against you. And Google's always looking at, is this profile complete? Is it accurate? Does it match the website? Down to, is the address written out the same exact way in both places? All these little things that add up to that effectiveness.
Yeah.
That's what sometimes people miss when they try to do it themselves. Whereas, if you have a website partner or a digital agency, we literally have lists of tasks that account for each step of the process to ensure that all happens before, we hand it back to the client.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better. I mean, specifically for that space, right? Like websites and local SEO, in order to do it, you need a site. And like, that's a huge way that you get leads for free, is just from having that, without having to tie into, paid ads and all that other stuff.
Yep. Yeah, and then, manufacturing, if we want to touch on that briefly as well, it is one of the most traditionally, it's one of our industries traditionally that has gotten away with having a dated or, non-updated site in the longest manner usually. And it's funny too, because usually they're the poster child of like that consultative high dollar considered purchase. This piece of equipment is thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And people want to read about it and make sure that it's the right fit before they even talk to sales, Like, look at our generation, which millennials are getting old now. People don't even want to order a pizza if they have to talk to someone. Let's make it easy here. So giving people that opportunity to do their own research and get comfortable before they put their hand up and say, I'm ready to talk to the salesperson, is so important, especially in the manufacturing space. We know how challenging it is, especially in the U.S., to have these manufacturers and these opportunities available. Making sure you're found is just half the battle.
Yeah, and like saying what your capabilities are, providing spec sheets on either equipment, like what your equipment can do, spec sheets on some of your products, right? Like that's where a lot of buyers are going to start. And if you don't have that information readily available, they may or may not contact you. But if you have it readily available, you'll more than likely be contacted at a higher rate than if you didn't have it.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too nerdy, but talk about a long tail keyword phrase, right?
Right.
When an engineer types in a very specific product number and use case and you show up for it, why would you look further? They're going to be like, got it here. Let's call them and ask if that's right. And it's so important. I think even the contract manufacturing side, that's where we see the importance go way up, because again, they're constantly chasing those new opportunities as well. So, having a few people find you is going to help the bottom line tremendously. They're usually not small dollar values, and they're usually not short time periods unless you're specializing in that. But yeah, I think manufacturing, at least in Pennsylvania, like I still find them out there. Let me help you.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, go away, website guy. But
I found one that hadn't been touched since 2008 the other day.
Yeah, I remember what was happening in 2008.
Yeah, well, the other thing, right, is like, a lot of these companies don't have time to dedicate to it, or if they do, like, they're missing out on big opportunities and can miss also just like technical things that need to get done, like indexing, right? Like if you don't index correctly, you're putting all of this effort into building it out, but then you're not reaping any of the benefits.
For sure. And I think another part of it too is like this is a personal feeling. Like manufacturing is one of my favorite, verticals to work in that our agency does. And the reason being is that I grew up in a small Western Pennsylvania town, or city, shout out anyone that knows or has been there. I call it the center of the universe. But those small towns, right, they were kind of built on either energy or manufacturing. A lot of those towns exist across the state of Pennsylvania. And, I've seen how those towns go from like, a roaring economy to a struggling economy. And there's a lot of jobs at stake in those small towns and those communities to make them exist. So when I see an opportunity to go into, an organization in one of those communities, it always hits me in the back of my mind that like, you're not just helping that company, like you're helping people keep their jobs and keep their communities afloat. Because those are some of the bigger keystone organizations in those communities. And once one shuts down, the reverberating effects are just sad to see.
Yeah.
So I always look at it that way. It's like, how do we keep making, it doesn't have to be Pennsylvania, we work with folks all over the country, but how do we keep those types of jobs in communities going by making sure that they have revenue, making sure that they have new jobs coming in. And that's why I get excited to work with those.
Yeah, that's a great call out. I mean, like, we are in the business of helping websites, but it has broader ramifications than that. And anytime you can help a business grow, right, you're helping that many more people.
Yeah. And it's my one little subtle way of like feeling good about what we do. It's we're always trying to help people, but that's one that you can really trace back to. This equates to people and jobs and livelihoods, and I think that's really special to talk about.
100%.
And then there's some other crazy things we've learned about government organizations that are also helping manufacturers with marketing and advertising budgets, and we help navigate that and love that. If anyone is a affected manufacturer, let me know. I can at least get you the information to see if you qualify. I think that's a really cool program.
Yeah, that is cool. And it's great because like, not to get into politics, right? But like American manufacturing is more important to have over here where you can, more than ever.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And, it's nice to see things being made too. That's another, I guess, last thing I'll add is one of my favorite things about going to a manufacturing company is you walk in the door and you see that this company makes some obscure thing you've never even thought of in your life. And they built this like, substantial or, really healthy business around it. I've seen some really unique ways that people make a living, and I think it's always so interesting to hear that story. It's always so interesting to learn about a new mechanical thing. I know you're mechanically inclined like myself, and I kind of geek out on that stuff. I'm like, wow, you built a business that does X million in revenue, and it's this thing that I've never even thought of? Like, who knew?
100%.
And you get to like share those stories, and I think that's where, obviously the website is very important because you can share that story, but then we layer in the video and it's even better.
We covered a lot of stuff, and I think that out of this, right, there's a ton of other stuff that we can cover. So, let us know if there's anything that you'd be interested in, either like specific use cases or, pricing ideas, or, hey, what pages should I have for my industry based off of what we've seen, and we'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I always suggest to everyone, even if you have a question, just reach out to me. If it's a simple answer and I can help you, I'm more than happy to do that. And then, if you're looking at a project, I'll try to guide you as best as I can to the service that fits you, the need. We'll explore, is this valuable? Is this not valuable? I'm happy to spend that time with anyone. Meeting up, what pages are going to be there? Let's figure it out. Yeah. So that the door is always open for that. If you do have that aging website out there, or if you know someone that has the aging website out there, I always joke that websites are like bad breath. No one's going to tell you if you have it. So if you have a friend or a family member that business is looking a little stale from a website standpoint, give them a nudge and then feel free to introduce me. I'll be happy to get the website Listerine out.
Awesome. Well, John, it's been a pleasure, and we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, likewise, Micah. It was fun, as always, and we'll catch you on the next one.